Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jamie Marasotis. I'm president of Lumina Foundation. I want to welcome you to our session on the next level workforce with Indiana's 51st governor, Eric Holcomb.
Indiana.
You'll hear from Governor Holcomb in just a minute here. You may have just heard his voice there in the background, I'm not sure. But I want to say a little bit about this topic before we begin, and then we're going to watch a brief video, and then we'll get into the conversation. Look, the future of the workforce in Indiana is one of the most important issues anyone needs to think about, whether they are the governor of a state, a business leader, or a citizen. In our case in Indiana, Governor Holcomb has made building the workforce, the next level workforce, the priority of his administration. Indiana in the last 15 years has gone from a state that's focused heavily on transforming its economy to the point where it now needs to transform its workforce to match the changes that have happened in the economy. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how that diversification of the economy is leading to a dramatic need to diversify the workforce. But first, let's watch a brief video, and then we'll get into our conversation. Roll the video, please.
Indiana, you know us, or at least you think you do. Our fertile soil, the big race, breaking away, Rudy, Hoosiers, and our love of basketball. And while you've always known us as the heart of the heartland, the crossroads of America, we've been busy, and we've changed. This is today's Indiana, and we've taken things to the next level. We're making it easier to start and build a business.
The entire project is over $110 million.
Hiring about 1,100 people.
$120 million into the project.
We're better at connecting ourselves to each other and to the world.
Governor is set to leave tomorrow for Japan.
First overseas trade mission.
Governor is headed to India.
We're building an educational system that looks to the future.
And then it filters down into the high school setting and into the education K through 12 in general. You're seeing a lot of reform, you're seeing a lot of innovative ideas take root and spread throughout the state.
If you do well here, we are guaranteeing you admission into that college. You are in a high school unlike any other in the entire nation.
Hoosiers have always been pioneers, and we continue to push toward new frontiers.
Infosys, the Indian IT outsourcing firm, making a big bet on America, announcing 10,000 U.S. jobs over the next 2 years.
The engine maker with its corporate headquarters in Columbus.
The clean city, a thriving downtown, which is what you need for a good tech community.
Ash Brokerage has its national corporate headquarters here in
Roche
downtown.
globally has made a $300 million investment over 10 years for this site.
Well, makers of a functional smartphone case headquartered right here in Indiana have some lofty goals for 2018.
Now you know, next level Indiana, the state that works.
So Governor Holcomb, welcome.
Great to be with you, Jamie.
Great to have you here. So I've lived in Indiana for the last decade. I'm an immigrant to the state, and I've experienced everything that video talks about right there. As someone who's new to the state and who's come to love living in Indiana, all of that really rings true to me. One of the things, we're here at the ASU GSV conference, that has been particularly striking is the way in which the tech community has grown and prospered in our state. The video mentions Infosys. The Salesforce Tower in Indianapolis is the largest building in the state of Indiana, sort of a symbol of the way in which tech has grown in our state. So what's in the water? Why has it become such an attractive place for tech?
We don't just grow corn anymore or basketball. We grow tech companies, and it's got a lot to do with ecosystem that has continued to mature and over time, you mentioned a decade plus. And certainly it, as you already alluded to, it started kind of back in 2005 when we said we got to right the ship, we got to get our books balanced, we got to be able to afford things that we need to do, but we can't right now. We were drifting and drowning in debt and delaying payments, and so we got the books balanced, and we became an economy that was very attractive because of our certainty and stability and predictability. That enabled us to then in turn focus also on our infrastructure needs. But the box that we haven't checked has been our workforce development. And so while tech companies have looked at the heart of the heartland, this hub, this central location in the middle of all the action, being able to connect to different markets around not just the country, but the world, they've taken advantage of our economic climate, our regulatory environment that's very attractive, almost magnetic when you're trying to scale up.
Right.
And then we went out and we said, okay, so how do we figure out, in addition to the capital being all over the world, how do we address those issues? How do we address that increasing the talent pipelines that come from those very universities? How do we start to partner with, we have Tech Point that works on all these projects with us, so that typical, or the traditional, I should say, State Chamber of Commerce or the Manufacturers Association, we now have a full complement of folks who are stepping up because every sector has become ag plus tech or manufacturing plus tech or logistics plus tech. And so we have sought to in a methodical way cultivate that soil, and it's paying off. And obviously, success breeds success. It attracts more. People want to be a part of it. And what we've, I think, maybe most importantly done is we haven't stopped there. We've said, now how do we get in our schools at the very first steps? So computer science in our schools, so more STEM, so connecting those dots from each episode in one's life, understanding that this is going to be a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the question, right? So, we've got this growing tech community. We've got all these opportunities. Success begets success, and we're seeing this in other areas now. The video mentioned, for example, that we have a low unemployment rate, 3.2%. I think was the rate that was listed on the video. So that's a good problem to have. On the other hand, now we've got to make sure that we've got enough qualified job candidates to fill those jobs to continue to grow that economy. So you talked a little bit about some of our workforce improvements that you're talking about, but let's hear a little bit more about that. What are some of the things that we're doing to try to build that next generation workforce?
Yeah, and all the progress we made, it's not necessarily been easy, but the low fruit's been picked, and it's a lot easier to pave a road than it is to transform someone's life. That's more holistic. When you get into the weeds of why someone is in the circumstance or the cycle that they're in, how do you break that cycle? 3.2%. I certainly know all the numbers, have memorized the statistics, understand what 3.2% represents, and to me, it's 109,000 Hoosiers with names and addresses. And that's just the unemployment rate. There's also the underemployment rate, the folks that are working 2 or 3 jobs. And how do you help them skill up for the jobs? I mean, there's a couple other figures out there that are just waiting for them to double or triple their salary. In Indiana, it's north of 90,000 unfilled jobs that I know of. That's a lowball figure too, by the way. That's in advanced manufacturing, life sciences, construction, logistics, transportation. We know specifically where these jobs are. And we know where the people are. So how do we connect them with the skills? In addition, you've got this force out there that says, you better get busy because over the next decade, you're going to have to replace north of 1.1 million jobs because of the 700-some thousand baby boomers that'll drop out of the labor force and the 300-some thousand Hoosiers. In addition to that, we're pulling along and have been for years in Indiana, and this is true around the country. In Indiana, we have 400-some thousand Hoosiers that don't have a high school diploma or the equivalency, 712,000 that started college and then dropped out, 27,000 in our prison system. How do we break those cycles? So when I threw out that 1.1 million that we're going to have to replace, I just went up to about 1.4 million of real, it's a target-rich environment. We've got these buckets of opportunity out there, but it's what programs work. The thing that's been so invigorating to me and encouraging to me about being here just in the last 24 hours is trying to harness this synergy and take it back to Indiana, because so many people here have already gone out there and tried things, and yes, of course, failed, and I'm glad they failed fast so I can learn from their mistakes, and I have some mistakes I can share with my cohorts around the country too, because this isn't unique, obviously, to Indiana. This is the country, and so that's what's so exciting is that's the real bonus. It's not a monetary bonus. The real bonus is when you meet individuals that have broken those cycles, and then you're able to share that there is a way.
So great to have a governor who's a policy wonk, by the way. All the data was just making me so excited to hear him talk about all those things. It's just wonderful. So, yeah, look, I think workforce readiness is a problem for a state. Indiana has a workforce readiness problem. But we also know that for the state to solve it doesn't mean that the government has to solve it. It means that a lot of different actors have to play a role. So how is Indiana as a state leveraging the private sector, higher education, the nonprofit sector in building this next level workforce that we need here in the 21st century?
Well, we're all responsible, and if we don't get it right together, we all pay a price individually, so the sum truly is greater than the parts. And when we reach out to Lumina, for instance, and knowing that you already have experience in folks who are homebound, or with folks who are incarcerated, or managing some of the credentials, that we don't have to relearn that. And so the power of partnerships, especially in today's world and going forward, I always say we're closer to 2050 than 1950. Yeah. Better start acting like it. And so to leverage those partnerships, it can't be this centralized, far away, mothership, top-down, heavy program. It doesn't work for the individual. Everything else in life is being directed and catered to the individual and needs. And by the way, I hope desires. I hope people are determined to create their own destiny, pursue their own passion. And that's in the rest of life, it's being catered to the individual. So why would we think some top-heavy, top-down approach? This is why, just really out of a gut reaction, we said, how do we take the bureaucracy out of it and get resources directly to employers and to employees and meet in the middle? So different people hear things differently. And so we rolled out a couple programs that said nextleveljobs.org. You go to this site, you click, you answer 5 questions, hit submit. Our Department of Workforce Development has 48 hours to have a real person call you. And that's where it gets the most difficult. That's where it gets muddy and messy and hard, because you start to figure out why someone, and it may not just be this traditional Department of Workforce Development program or Indiana Economic Development program. It might have something to do with Health and Human Services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where we're making progress. We've had, since August 14th, when we rolled that program out, we've had over 400,000 clicks on that website. We've had over 257,000 individual, unique people, real people from Indiana. And we've sent about 18,000 Hoosiers on their way to get skilled up in 5 key high demand, high wage jobs. And then in addition to the individual, the employee, we also said to employers, if you've got a way outside of our community college system or our Work Ones at our Department of Workforce Development, if you've got a system at your small business to train someone, the state will send you a stipend. If they're still working for you in 6 months and you've trained them, hire them, we'll send you a stipend. And we created a $10 million program there, $5 million, and we're north of 5.2 million, and we're not. And so I went back to the legislature and I said, it's working, I need more money. It's changing lives. And by the way, if we can figure out a way to take that 27,000 Hoosiers who are incarcerated with that recidivism rate where it's 18,000 in and 14,000 out, and it just keeps going like this. If we can decrease that rate, it's a $758 million hit to our budget. Think about what we can do with those savings that are going to transform lives. Right. But we can't unless we figure out what programs are working. And again, that's the power of this summit. I've already picked up a lot of good tips, and I'm glad I'm the only governor here.
We're glad you're here as well. So, look, it is an ed tech and workforce development summit, but there's also a reality that this work takes place in the context of people's lives. And Indiana is dealing with challenges that every state is dealing with the opioid epidemic, with issues of challenges to family structures, et cetera. What have we been doing in Indiana to deal with the opioid epidemic? You've made it a priority of your administration, that's for sure. And how could that actually impact, how could that be headwinds on the effort to actually improve the workforce and build a better and stronger economy?
Yeah, simply put, I've always said that our mission in Indiana is to be the best state, strive to be the best state for growth of an individual or a business or a community. And we have some strategies. They're my 5 pillars that we focus on, laser focus on. Don't get distracted by a lot of other shiny objects that fly around. One is strengthening our economy, always trying to diversify it. Indiana, we've been tethered to the we're the #1 manufacturing state in the country per capita. Good, and also a vulnerability in this. With the scale and pace of change that's happening around us, we better have our act together. Strengthening our infrastructure, so being able to connect with markets all over the world and buy and sell, and cultural exchanges, et cetera. Making sure that we're skilling up our workforce, making sure we're delivering good government service at a great taxpayer value. And then, as you say, there's the public health space that if you don't get that right, it makes everything else harder, if not impossible. Especially impossible in the framework of someone struggling with substance abuse or addictions or mental health issues. And so I highlighted the opioid epidemic that fits under the public health pillar because we're seeing, again, not unique to Indiana, but we're literally in Indiana seeing signs pop up in front of businesses that say, now hiring, we don't drug test. That's, and so what are we going to do about it? And there is no, obviously, one issue. This is another holistic, very complex. We have to have a system of care in place that deals with, yes, enforcement. I mean, we want to be the worst state in the world to peddle these evil substances. But we have to recognize, we have to invest significantly in prevention efforts, but then treatment is critically important because it's not just ripping person's life apart or taking away. I had an individual come up to me about a year ago, walked across a courthouse square, and he stuck his hand out to shake it, and he said, I wanted to meet you, and I hope to meet you in 6 months. And I thought he was referring to maybe an election result would be successful, and he would have been able to say, I met the governor in Delphi, Indiana, on the Carroll Courthouse Square. And I said, well, it's great to meet you. And he said, you know why I hope to meet you in 6 months? And I was, again, thinking somewhat egocentrically about it. And he said, I hope I'm alive in 6 months. He said, I've been sober, dry for 6 months. I hope I am in another 6 months. And so it was at that point where I just said, I refuse to be fatalistic about this. Easy to be, because you're seeing it ravage families and communities and businesses. And so that's when I made the decision that we have to do a whole lot more, or it's going to continue to anchor and drag down and put at risk, again, the life is the most important, but real opportunity to grow our communities. And it's stretching and tearing apart, actually, ultimately, all of our resources, whether it's at our county jails or at our, our CASA programs or our court system and hospitals, and that ripple effect. And so we've done a lot to make sure that we're decreasing the volume that's in the system to prevent, and then making sure that there is a lot more access for people to get on that road to recovery, to get their life back, their family back. And that's key, is to having immediate access to the appropriate care. And so you're not just dealing with it in an episodic way in this episode, and then you're moved on to the next step and the next step. And just like workforce development, used to be, the bureaucracy would say that this is my program, I'm only focused on this part of it. And once you move to this program, that's someone else's program. And it's lifelong, and true with someone struggling from addiction as well. And so we're starting to, even though I do believe that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, but we're starting to bend that trajectory down, but no time to celebrate yet.
So we're almost out of time. It goes fast in these conversations, but I want to pick up on your theme here of the lifelong effects here. So you know better than anybody, you're governor for 4 years. If you're good, you get reelected. You have a short period of time when you can really have an influence on what happens in terms of the trajectory of the state. You've made some very important initial investments here, made some smart moves here in the beginning. But what's the long game? How do we future-proof the state against the challenges that you're talking about? How do we make sure that we really do have this next level workforce that's going to power our economy, strengthen our democratic system, improve our social well-being? How do we do that? How do we play the long game in Indiana?
Right. Well, something that I've been most proud of, to be associated with both of my predecessors, but one, Mitch Daniels, came in 2005, and what happened was a real shift in the culture, and that is playing the long game. Not, first of all, it's measuring what you're doing, so that if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. And so we have to have the right data for us to make decisions. And then we need to agree on what our needs are, have a plan, put the plan in place, have the courage and the will to execute and implement. But it's the long game, I think, is affected most by the culture, and that is the people that you're attracting, your team, following through, not backing off just because the going gets tough or it's new. I mean, we live in this time, like I said, of this unprecedented pace of change. And what we're seeking to do in every department, in every agency, is to be the change agents, to be the ones creating the change and making that change our ally, not our adversary, not fearing it. And so that drives what programs you're implementing. And typically what happens with all the fear that may be on the front side, once good comes out of it, the success attracts success. And people want to be a part of that. And when they start to see the real people, when they hear those testimonials, people want more of it. And so that's where we're taking the state of Indiana. That's why we're very aspirational. Mitch Daniels, who was one of my predecessors, now the president of Purdue University, he always talked about aiming higher. I always talk about how do you take it to the next level. So if you're ranked number 1, you better start competing against yourselves. And so we were, U.S. News and World Report ranked Indiana number 1 in terms of state government efficiency and effectiveness. And we called all of our agencies in and sat everyone in a room just like this and said, now what are your ideas to improve on? What ideas have been bottled up? What ideas have not been listened to? And because we have to stay number 1. And because everyone else in the world is taking everybody's blueprint and saying they did the hard work and they should. They did the hard work. This is what we need to do if we need to get to be number 1. And if we're 48th, there are some public health categories where we rank low. And so we have a lot more work to do. And how do we get to 45 and then 43 and then 38 and 21? And you have to play that long game, a plan in place with a proven track record if you want the momentum to continue.
Predictions, Pacers, Cavaliers?
Pacers.
Yeah. I had to ask that.
In five.
Exciting times ahead for Indiana. Governor Holcomb, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all.